Hello everyone, how are you? So have you ever thought about thinking? Of course you have. So today we're going to talk about thinking the right way to let you make better decisions and outplay your opponents in Overwatch. The framework we're going to be using for this is a process developed by the United States military actually called the OODA Cycle. This has a ton of application with a lot of things, but it's something we can really use to our advantage in Overwatch. So what is the OODA cycle? If you Google it, you're probably going to find some crazy long articles and essays with lots of words. Now, words are good, but these are really just making it too complicated. It's really just this, people. Think before you act. But if only it were that simple, right? We would all be pros. So let's go a bit deeper into it. Now, the OODA loop is actually this. Observe, orient, decide, and act. The first O is observe, and that is taking in raw information. In Overwatch, these would be things like pressing tab and seeing what your team composition is, noticing what the enemy team composition is, seeing people's health bars, anything like that. The next O is orient, and that is when you modify your observations based on past knowledge or meta-knowledge. An example is if you fought the same Genji multiple times and he always uses reflect right after he dashes, you will avoid shooting him after his dash. If the enemy Ana only ever nano boosts her Reinhardt and no one else, you can plan for that in future fights. The D is decide. That is quite simply the step where you determine what action you're going to take exactly. The time it takes to do this step is one of the most important factors when it comes to outplaying an opponent, and we'll get into that in just a second. Finally, we have A. Act. This is executing your decision. This is your aim, physical dexterity, your ability to properly control your character. This is what the vast majority of Overwatch learning videos are about. The A. We won't be focusing so much on it here though. The speed at which you process this OODA loop is probably the single best, biggest factor when it comes to climbing the ranked ladder. Some players don't even execute this loop at all though, and I need to address that first. Something that I hear actually quite a bit is that players find themselves stuck on autopilot. That is, they can't really get their head into the game, and they find themselves constantly making silly mistakes when they just can't seem to focus. This is a result of not taking that first step, the observational step. If you find yourself kind of out of it, kind of running on autopilot, you need to make a conscious effort to observe. Press tab, look at the heroes, think about what you're seeing, look at the health bars, look at where your allies are, your enemies are. Look as far forward as possible. And I don't mean into the future either, I just mean distance. Start observing your enemies the moment they come into vision, even if they're far away. Don't wait until they're right up in your face. Many players find themselves in lower skill brackets simply because they're running through every game on pure reaction, and they're not actually observing anything until it slaps them in the face. And by that time, it's usually too late. I know it sounds silly, but next time you're in a game, really take an effort to look around, take in the view. Make it a conscious effort. Players constantly have tons of information available to them that they don't even bother utilizing. Once you start consciously observing what's happening in the game, your autopilot light will switch right off and you'll start running OODA loops in your mind naturally. Alright, so now that we're actually thinking, let's talk about how you can exploit this natural decision-making loop to outplay your opponents. You see, most players do their own OODA cycle, and that's it. Even if it's someone who's very fast and they make decisions quickly, once they've made their decision, they wrap it up and call it a day until another decision needs to be made. This is how you get outplayed. Instead, you need to be doing multiple OODA cycles and acting as late as possible. Why? Well, sure, you have your own observations to make, but what about your opponent? They have observations as well, and you need to think about what they can see. So really, you're doing your own OODA loop as well as your opponent's. If you can do your opponent's cycle and complete it before they do, you can make an action that they won't be able to predict that forces them to completely redo their entire decision. If you do it consistently, that's what people call getting in their head. If you control both your OODA loop as well as theirs, you essentially control the entire fight. But it doesn't stop there. If there are 2 enemies, you're now doing 3 loops. Remember, 1 for yourself and 2 for them. 3 enemies, you need to do 4 loops, but it still doesn't stop there. Next, you can get into your allies' heads to predict what they're going to do, and that requires you to do even more. A true super genius who thinks at the speed of light would ideally be doing 12 OODA cycles for every single decision they made, 1 for each player. But that is obviously impossible, so generally you should limit it to only the players closest to you when in those fast-paced, close situations. Still though, how do you manage to think for both yourself and all those other players? How can you be fast enough? Well, This is the only time on this channel that I will promote speed over quality. You see, the quality of the decision is definitely important, and we go over a lot of that stuff on this channel. But fast, low-quality decisions will beat out slow, high-quality decisions every time. You can be sloppy with your own decision-making when you're in those high-pressure 1v1s and close combat situations, as long as you're thinking fast enough to get into your opponent's OODA cycle. In fact, you don't need to make a decision at all sometimes. If you do nothing but run your opponent's thought process, and you do it faster than they do it, you can simply predict what their next action is and counter it without ever having to think up an original action for yourself. You can actually see this quite a bit if you watch my own gameplay. I really pay very little attention to myself, and instead I play the game sort of through the eyes of my opponents and my allies. I simply think about what they're observing and what decisions they want to make, and I act accordingly to either help or counter that decision, depending on whether it's an ally or an enemy. So next time you're in a match, really think about your own OODA cycle. Are you observing everything you can and orienting yourself properly? And if you are you considering the observations and orientation of your opponents? Mastering OODA cycles and getting into your opponent's head is the key to being successful in any fast-paced game such as Overwatch. Focus less on coming up with really great plans and elaborate decisions in games, and focus more on just basic, simple decisions, but really, really fast. Remember, I'll say it one more time. Basic, small, but fast decisions will always beat out big, complex, bulky, slow decisions every time. So I'll leave the rest to you. How do you manage your decisions in game? And do you think there was something I missed? Let me know. Also, I would like to give a shout out to Perpu for making my new end card. I think it looks really great. He posts some of his vectors and graphics on his Twitter, which I linked in the description. Thanks again, Perpu. But anyway, like if you liked it, which I hope you did. Stay positive, and have a great day. Peace out, guys.